There are moments in life that seem ordinary until a single sentence changes everything. That afternoon, your father handed you a folder, his expression calm, almost gentle. And then, with a voice that carried no hesitation, he said, "I used your emergency fund to buy your brother a house." It wasn't anger that came first, it was silence. A heavy, suffocating kind of silence that wrapped around your chest until it hurt to breathe. Inside, something cracked. The kind of breaking that doesn't make a sound, but leaves a mark forever. You stood there, unable to speak, realizing it wasn't just the money you'd lost, it was trust. And trust, once broken, never feels the same again. In that moment, you learned a painful truth. The deepest wounds don't always come from strangers, sometimes they come from the very people you thought would never hurt you. If you've ever felt that kind of heartbreak, the kind that's quiet but unforgettable, hit like and subscribe to stay with us. Because the story you're about to hear might just remind you. Love should never come at the cost of respect. You still remember the sound, the soft rustle of paper breaking the silence in the room. Your father sat across from you, sunlight spilling through the window, resting gently on his calm, unreadable face. The folder lay open on the table, pages filled with numbers, signatures, and the quiet cruelty of a single sentence that froze your heart. "I used your emergency fund to buy your brother a house." The air thickened. You could hear the ticking of the clock, each second pressing heavier against your chest. A part of you wanted to believe you had misheard. Maybe it was a joke, a misunderstanding. But when you met his eyes, steady, unwavering, every trace of hope disappeared. You asked, your voice trembling, "Dad, you didn't even ask me first." Close quote. He sighed, as if explaining something trivial. "It's a family matter. Your brother needed help. You have a stable job. You'll earn it back." The words were simple, almost reasonable. But the moment they left his lips, something inside you cracked. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was disbelief, that quiet, paralyzing disbelief when you realized someone you trusted most could dismiss years of your effort with a shrug. You stood up, walked out of the room, each step heavy, as if carrying the weight of your entire childhood behind you. You could still see flashes of memory: mornings when you helped your mother set up a market stall before sunrise, evenings when you came home exhausted but smiling because your father looked proud. You had been the child who never asked for much, the one who quietly carried responsibility without complaint. You remember the day you got into college. He hadn't congratulated you. Instead, he asked, "So, what are you going to do to support the family after you graduate?" Close quote. You smiled then, too. "I'll try my best, Dad." And you did. You worked long hours, saved every penny, skipped vacations, skipped birthdays, all for that emergency fund. A symbol of security. A piece of peace you had built on your own. But today, it was gone, turned into someone else's comfort. You returned to your room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed. The sunlight painted the walls gold, but inside, everything felt grey. You picked up your phone and checked your account balance. Then your eyes fell on the picture of your father and brother on the desk, smiling, arms over each other's shoulders. You had taken that photo. A hollowness settled inside you. Not because of the money, but because you realized that trust once taken can never be fully returned. Have you ever felt that? That sharp, invisible ache when someone takes not your possessions, but the belief that you mattered to them. That night, you didn't sleep. The clock ticked, steady and cruel. You lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the old house. Everything familiar felt foreign. You remembered dinners where your father always gave your brother the best part of the meal, the proud smile he saved only for him. You had told yourself it was nothing, that love in a family was never equal but always sincere. But now, you knew better. The signs had always been there, small, quiet moments of favoritism you ignored to protect the illusion of harmony. You wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. The pain was too deep, too quiet. You whispered into the dark, "Maybe love in this house was never about fairness. Maybe I was only loved when I was useful." The next morning, you woke early as usual. You still made coffee for him. Still smiled when you said, "Good morning." He looked up and said, "Don't be upset. Your brother just needs a start. You understand, don't you?" Close quote. You smiled again. "I understand, Dad." But that smile didn't reach your eyes. In that silence between words, something inside you shifted. Not bitterness, just resolve. The resolve to walk away from a place that called itself home but no longer felt like one. You began to gather your things, a few papers, small keepsakes, the receipts that told the story of your independence. Each folded document was a reminder. You had worked too hard to be treated as an afterthought. That afternoon, you went to a small cafe, the same one you used to visit after long days at work. The smell of baked bread filled the air, the quiet hum of life around you. Through the window, you watched people laughing, talking, living freely. You wondered, when was the last time I allowed myself to live for me? Close quote. You scroll through your phone, looking at old messages, thank yous from friends who'd helped, photos of your graduation, the one your father hadn't attended. Work was busy, close quote, he'd said. You sighed. Maybe growing up had always meant giving too much without realizing how little you were left with. That night, when you came home, they were talking about the new house, your father and brother, voices full of excitement. You sat quietly in the corner, invisible in your own home. And that's when you realized something painful. Silence can hurt more than words ever could. You opened your phone again, not to post, but to read. To find comfort in strangers who might understand. And there it was, a sentence that stopped you cold. Sometimes, we only become adults when we accept that we can't make others love us the way we need. You read it over and over, as if each word stitched a tiny wound in your chest. Maybe that was what growing up truly meant, learning to let go of what no longer feeds your soul. The next day, you called in for a short leave from work. You didn't explain why, you just said you needed time. Then you packed a small bag, grabbed your wallet, and bought a ticket to a coastal town you had only seen once in passing. There was no plan, no destination, only the need to breathe somewhere your heart could stop aching. The bus ride was quiet. Through the window, the world blurred by fields, towns, the endless sky. You leaned your head against the glass, feeling the cool vibration against your skin. For the first time in years, you weren't rushing anywhere. You were simply going. When you arrived, the air smelled of salt and sunlight. The ocean stretched before you, calm but vast. You walked until your shoes filled with sand, until the sound of waves replaced the noise in your head. Sitting there, on the edge of the sea, you whispered, "I'm not angry anymore, but I can't live like before." It wasn't a declaration of rebellion, it was a quiet promise to yourself. To stop bleeding for love that didn't see you. That evening, you called your mother. Her voice trembled on the other end. "Your father didn't mean any harm," close quote, she said softly. "Please don't hold this against him." You smiled faintly, looking at the horizon. "I know, Mom. I'm not angry. I just need to find myself again." Silence filled the line, gentle but heavy. Then she whispered, "Take your time, my child. When your heart feels light again, come home." The call ended, but her words lingered, not as a plea, but as permission. You looked out at the sea one last time that day. The sun was setting, orange melting into gold, and for the first time in years, you felt something that resembled peace. Maybe healing doesn't happen when things go back to the way they were. Maybe it begins the moment you decide to stop apologizing for wanting peace. The next morning, you woke up early, barefoot, walking along the shore. Each step felt lighter, like shedding a weight you'd carried too long. You didn't know what would happen next, how your father would react, how the family would change, but for once, it didn't matter. What mattered was that you were finally choosing yourself. The sea breeze brushed your face, and you let out a quiet laugh. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was freedom. And as the tide washed over your feet, you thought, maybe this is what growing up really means, learning that walking away isn't weakness, it's self-respect. If you've ever stood at that same crossroads, torn between staying for love and leaving for peace, maybe you'll understand. And if this story resonates somewhere deep within you, press like, not for me, but as a quiet way of saying, I've been there too. Subscribe if you wish to walk with us through stories like this, stories about love, loss, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can ever do is to leave a place that made you forget your worth. When the night bus carried you back to the city, the lights flickered through the window, painting soft lines of gold and shadow across your face. Outside stretched an endless road. Inside, a silence that no words could fill, a silence you somehow knew would stay with you for a long time. You rented a small room, just big enough for a bed, a desk, and a window that opened onto a quiet alley. Each morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains like the gentle touch of an old friend who had finally found you again. The first days were strange. No father's voice reminding you to wake up. No clinking dishes from a shared breakfast. Only you and the quiet. But in that quiet, something unexpected appeared. Freedom. No one told you what to do. No one measured your worth. No one demanded you to explain your choices. For the first time, you could simply exist without earning the right to. You started small. You woke up early, cooked your own breakfast, eggs, toast, and coffee. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the small room and, for a brief moment, made the loneliness feel softer. In the afternoon, you went job hunting, anything that could help you live without borrowing or owing anyone again. At first, you worked at a cafe. Later, you found a temporary job at a small company. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough. You worked hard, quietly, asking for nothing more than a chance to stand on your own feet. And in your eyes, there was something new, a quiet kind of pride. Because for once, you weren't just surviving. You were building. You weren't depending on anyone. You weren't proving anything. You were simply living. Maybe this was what adulthood really meant, not the absence of pain, but the ability to keep going, even with the ache still inside. Every night after work, you walked home along the same street lit with warm yellow lamps. The sound of traffic, the chatter of people, the rhythm of footsteps, it all blended into a soft melody of life, one you'd never truly heard before. Among the crowd, you felt small, but for the first time, you also felt like you belonged. One evening, you stopped by a small second-hand bookstore. Inside, under the amber light, a woman was rearranging worn-out books. She smiled when she saw you. "First time here?" Close quote, she asked. "You like it? This place smells like memories." You smiled back, not knowing why your chest suddenly felt lighter. From then on, you began visiting the bookstore after work, sometimes to read, sometimes just to sit in silence. And in that silence, piece by piece, your heart began to heal. But healing is never a straight road. One night, your phone buzzed a message from your mother. "Your father's sick. He's in the hospital." You froze. A storm of emotions surged inside: worry, anger, pity, fear. Memories flooded in: the times he fixed your bicycle, the evenings he sat under dim light reading the newspaper, the moments that once defined home. No matter how deep the wound was, the thought of losing him made your heart tighten. The next morning, you went to the hospital. Your father lay there, thinner than before, his once steady eyes now tired but still proud. When he saw you, he didn't speak. Neither did you. Only one thought crossed your mind. Sometimes silence is the apology words can't carry. You poured him a glass of water, your hands trembling slightly. "Feeling any better?" Close quote, you asked softly. He nodded, voice hoarse. "Didn't think you'd come." You answered quietly, "I didn't think I would either." Both of you laughed, not out of joy, but out of understanding. And in that small, fragile moment, you realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, it's about peace. The following days, you visited often. You didn't talk much, just brought fruit, newspapers, or simply sat nearby. Gradually, the silence between you became less heavy, almost gentle. One evening, as you were about to leave, he said softly, "I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I hurt you." You turned back. His eyes no longer carried authority, only regret. "I know, Dad," close quote, you said. "But I think we both learned something from it." Neither of you cried. But in that stillness, something heavy finally loosened. That night, back in your small room, you opened the window and let the wind rush in. The city sparkled outside, alive and restless, but inside, your heart felt still and free. You realized forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about no longer letting it define you. You sat down and wrote in your old notebook, "Today, I saw my father again. And I realized pain doesn't hold me anymore. It has become the soil where I grew." You smiled and closed the notebook gently. Maybe loss isn't the end after all. Maybe it's just the door to another beginning. Time passed. "If my father hadn't done what he did, I might never have left. And if I hadn't left, I might never have learned how to truly live for myself." You smiled at the thought. Life had a strange way of teaching lessons, sometimes through love, sometimes through loss, but always with purpose. One afternoon, as you walked home from work, the golden light spilled across the city. You saw children laughing in the park, an old couple sharing an umbrella, a group of friends teasing each other over coffee. And for the first time, you didn't feel like an outsider watching life, you were in it. That realization hit softly but deeply. You had built a life that no longer depended on approval. You had learned to exist not as someone's child, not as someone's shadow, but as yourself. You didn't need grand achievements or applause. Just quiet mornings, honest work, and the peace of knowing you were enough. Still, sometimes, in the quiet hours, your mind wandered back to the house you left, to the faces that once hurt you, but also made you who you are. And instead of pain, you felt something else: gratitude. Because everything that once broke you had also rebuilt you. You took out your notebook again and wrote. Maybe healing isn't forgetting the pain. Maybe it's remembering without bleeding. The words looked simple, but they carried the weight of everything you'd lived through. You closed the notebook and looked out the window. The city below shimmered, full of stories, of people loving and losing, of small miracles happening every day. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after losing everything, if you've ever learned to stand again, even when no one clapped, know this. You are not alone. Maybe today still hurts. Maybe you still wake up feeling tired. But as long as you keep walking, light will find you. It always does. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of the strength you forgot you had, press like, not for me, but for yourself. Because every time you choose kindness over bitterness, every time you choose peace over pride, you're already winning a quiet battle no one sees. And if you want to keep walking alongside stories like this, stories that don't glorify pain but celebrate healing, subscribe so you won't walk alone on the days that feel heavy. Because sometimes all we really need is one story that reminds us we've been hurt, but we're still here. And we're still brave enough to love this world again. That month, the city slipped into its rainy season. Sudden showers blurred the streets, softening every sound. You still went to work as usual, but every evening, instead of rushing home, you stood under the awning of the same quiet cafe, watching the rain fall. And somewhere between the rhythm of the drops and the hum of the city, you realized something simple: peace doesn't come from the absence of storms, but from no longer fearing them. One afternoon, while you were reading in your favorite corner, a voice broke through the quiet. "You come here often, don't you?" Close quote. You looked up and met the eyes of a young woman, a stranger, but not unfamiliar. She wore a light-colored jacket, holding a cup of tea, her smile soft and steady. You nodded. "Yeah. It's quieter here than the rest of the city." She smiled. "That's what I like about it too. It's one of the few places where you can still hear yourself breathe." Something about that line stopped you. It had been so long since someone said something that reached past your ears straight into your heart. You saw her again a few times after that, sometimes at the bookstore, sometimes at the same cafe. Neither of you planned it. You just kept arriving at the same place, at the same time. She told you about her heartbreak, how she'd once lost herself in someone else's world, and spent months trying to rebuild who she was. You didn't say much, you just listened. And as she spoke, you realized something. Parts of her story sounded like your own. Two people who had been broken, now slowly learning how to live again. The conversations grew longer, the silences more comfortable. And before you even noticed, something unfamiliar began to stir inside you. Your heart began to beat differently. Not with excitement, but with recognition. For the first time in a long time, you felt seen, not pitied, not fixed, just understood. She wasn't trying to heal you. She simply showed up, quietly, consistently, like sunlight returning after a long winter. And maybe that's why, without realizing it, you started healing too. One night, the two of you sat by the riverbank. The wind brushed against your face, carrying the faint scent of rain. Streetlights shimmered across the water. She asked, "Have you forgiven the person who hurt you?" Close quote. You paused, staring into the distance. "I think so. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I don't let them hurt me anymore." She smiled, that soft, knowing smile. "Then you've come farther than most." You looked at her then, really looked, and realized that her presence wasn't a coincidence. She was a mirror showing you how far you'd come, and how capable you still were of loving. Days turned into weeks. You fell into a quiet rhythm, mornings filled with work, evenings with warm tea and laughter that felt like a secret shared between two souls. But deep down, a small fear lingered, a fear of losing again. A fear that happiness, once found, could vanish as quickly as it came. One night, sitting by the window, you wrote in your journal, "I'm afraid to trust again. But I'm even more afraid of staying closed forever. Between the two fears, I choose to love again." Then came the message that changed everything. Your company wanted to send you on a long-term assignment to a new city, a new start. It was the opportunity you had worked years for. But this time, you hesitated. When you told her, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You should go. This is your next chapter." You asked softly, "And what about us?" Close quote. She smiled, eyes glistening in the dim light. "If it's meant to be, we'll meet again. And if not, then I'll still be grateful that our paths crossed." Her words felt like a breath of wind, gentle but final. That night, you couldn't sleep. You replayed her words again and again until they no longer hurt, only settled into a quiet truth. Sometimes love isn't about holding on, it's about giving each other space to grow. When you left the city, it was raining again. You pulled your suitcase through the wet streets, pausing once more in front of the cafe where it all began. Everything looked the same, the lights, the scent of roasted coffee, yet you knew that you weren't. You stood there for a moment, letting the rain wash over you, and whispered, "Thank you." Because leaving didn't feel like losing anymore. It felt like continuing a step toward the person you were always meant to become. On the train out of the city, you watched raindrops race down the window, each one carrying a memory you no longer needed to keep. And for the first time, instead of pain, you felt peace. The new city welcomed you with blue skies and tree-lined streets. Everything was unfamiliar, the people, the air, even the silence. But strangely, it didn't scare you. You had learned to find comfort in starting over. Work went well. Life moved forward. You made friends, discovered small cafes, and learned new streets by heart. Yet somewhere inside, a quiet part of you still carried her, the girl who entered your life like a whisper and left like a breeze. Maybe that's why you never tried to forget her. Because not all goodbyes are meant to erase, some are meant to remind. One evening, after work, you wandered through a park near your apartment. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. You watched couples walking hand in hand, kids laughing, and a few people sitting alone at peace, just like you. You realized you weren't lonely anymore. The ache that used to define your nights had softened into gratitude. You took out your phone and typed a note. I used to think happiness meant having someone who'd stay forever. But now I know happiness is when I can still smile, even after they've gone. You saved the note and kept walking, the cool air brushing against your skin. If you're listening to this and someone's face just came to mind, someone you loved, lost, and still miss sometimes, maybe your heart is trying to tell you something too. Thank you for loving. Thank you for not closing your heart. And if this story has warmed something quiet inside you tonight, press like, not for me, but for yourself, for surviving, for forgiving, for choosing to stay open even after being hurt. If you'd like to keep walking alongside stories like this, stories about loss, renewal, and the gentle art of healing, subscribe so we can meet again in the next one. Because the truth is simple. Light never disappears. It only steps away long enough for you to learn how to find it within yourself. Time had passed quietly, and your life finally felt steady. Work in the new city was going well. Your co-workers respected you. The rhythm of your days had become soft, predictable, peaceful. Sometimes at night, you looked up at the sky not to search for anything, but simply to remind yourself that every wound eventually becomes a past, if you have the courage to keep walking forward. But peace has a strange way of testing people. It never lasts forever. That morning, as you set your coffee down on the table, your phone began to ring. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. You hesitated for a moment, then answered. Son, close quote, a voice said, rough, trembling, and unmistakably familiar. It's me, your father. Time stopped. You had told yourself you were ready, that you could face him if the day ever came. But hearing his voice again was like reopening an old scar, the kind that never truly healed. He spoke again, quieter this time. I want to see you. Just once. That afternoon, you found yourself standing outside a small cafe on a quiet street. The rain was falling lightly, misting the air, blurring everything in sight. When the door opened, you saw him, older, smaller, with silver hair and a tired smile that trembled at the edges. He looked at you like someone trying to recognize a face from a dream. You sat across from each other, the silence heavy, almost sacred. He wrapped his hands around his cup, fingers trembling slightly, and asked, how have you been? Close quote. You swallowed, your throat dry. I'm fine. He nodded. You look well. Better than I deserve to see. You didn't reply. For a moment, the air between you both was filled with the kind of quiet that says more than any words ever could. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph. You stared. It was the picture of your family, your mother, your little brother, and you smiling on your 8th birthday. He placed it gently on the table. I used to think being a father meant giving to the one who needed it most, close quote, he said softly. But I was wrong. I didn't protect the family, I broke it. You looked at him. For years, you had rehearsed what you would say if this moment ever came. But now, faced with his shaking hands and weathered face, all the anger you'd carried seemed smaller, not gone, but quieter. You could have asked, why did you take from me? Why did you choose him? But you didn't. Because somehow, in that moment, you understood some answers don't heal. They only reopen wounds. He told you about the years after you left. Your brother had moved away too. Your mother had fallen ill. And he had lived in that same house alone, surrounded by silence. I lost everything, close quote, he said. But the hardest part wasn't the silence. It was realizing that no one was left to call me dad. You turned away. You didn't want him to see your eyes fill with tears. Inside, two versions of yourself battled, the one who still hurt and the one who couldn't bear to see him crumble. Maybe this was what life did. It waited until you had healed enough to face the very thing that once broke you. The wind outside whispered against the glass, carrying the faint smell of coffee and rain. He looked up, his eyes soft. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know if I could go back, I wouldn't do it again. You took a deep breath, looked straight into his eyes, and said quietly, I can't be the same son I was before. But I can see you as a man who made mistakes and is trying to make them right. He froze, then smiled, a small trembling smile that looked like relief. That was the first time in years you've seen him look peaceful. After that, you began to see him more often. Sometimes you'd just sit together, no big conversations, no forced apologies, just quiet companionship. You took him to doctor's appointments, brought him food, and listened as he told stories from a past you'd never known, the young man he once was, the dreams he never fulfilled, the love he never learned to show. And slowly, the space between you both began to soften. Not erased, but softened. One evening, he called you into his room, his voice weaker than usual. I sold your brother's house, close quote, he said quietly. You smiled through tears. This time, I know that if I walk away, there won't be anyone left to come back to. He exhaled softly, a breath that sounded almost like peace. And then, as the sunlight filtered through the hospital window, he closed his eyes, not in pain, but in quiet surrender. You stepped out of the hospital that evening, the city washed in the gold of the setting sun. The air smelled of rain, and the wind brushed gently against your face. You looked up at the sky, the same sky that once held your loneliness, and whispered, "I forgive you." Forgiveness didn't make the past disappear, but it lifted the weight of it. You realized that peace wasn't about changing what happened, it was about no longer letting it define you. And in that moment, you understood. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving the version of yourself that once carried so much hate. If you're listening to this right now, and there's someone in your heart you still can't forgive, maybe this is your sign. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for an apology and start giving yourself the gift of release. Because forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. If this story touched something in you tonight, press like, not for the story, but for your own heart, for its strength, its patience, and its ability to keep loving even after breaking. And if you want to keep walking with me through stories like this, stories of pain, healing, and second chances, subscribe so you won't walk alone the next time life feels heavy. Because at the end of it all, forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it simply allows you to live again. After the funeral, the house felt emptier than ever. Your footsteps echoed through the hollow rooms, blending with the faint scent of incense still lingering in the air. On the altar, your father's photo smiled softly, not the strict man you once feared, but someone gentler, almost at peace. You stood there for a long time, saying nothing, afraid that if you turned away, he might truly disappear forever. Some losses don't arrive with noise or tears, they come quietly, wrapped in a silence that feels heavier than grief itself. You thought you were ready, that you were prepared for this moment, but when it came, your heart still clenched, as if someone had taken a piece of it without asking. That night, you opened the old notebook, the one where you used to write bits of thoughts about him, about childhood, about all the things left unsaid. The last page was still blank. You hesitated for a long moment before writing, "I don't know if you can hear me, Dad, but I've forgiven you. And maybe I'm learning to forgive myself too for holding on to anger for so long." When you closed the notebook, a tear fell onto the page. But this time, it didn't sting. It felt like it had finally washed away the last trace of bitterness left inside you. Days passed, and you returned to the city. The world continued as usual, people hurrying, cars rushing by, coffee brewing, deadlines waiting. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. It wasn't the world that was different, it was the way you saw it. You began to notice the beauty in small things again: a morning without rain, a cup of coffee brewed just right, the laughter of strangers on the street. Sometimes, you even stopped for a moment, listening to your own heartbeat, calm, steady, alive. You realized that healing isn't about forgetting the pain, but learning to live well even when it's still there. One afternoon, you visited the park where your father used to sit and read the paper. The same old wooden bench was still there, worn and faded with time. You sat down, closed your eyes, and imagined him sitting beside you, rambling about things you used to think were unimportant. Only now, you wished you had listened more. You remembered his scoldings, his rare laughter, and the way his hand felt in yours at the hospital. All of it came back, not sharp or painful, just quiet, like ripples fading across still water. Dad, close quote, you whispered to the wind, "I think I understand now, being a father, being a son, no one ever gets it perfect. But if I had one more chance, I just want to say thank you for loving me in the only way you knew how." You smiled faintly, eyes closed, and for a second, you could almost feel the warmth of his presence beside you. Months went by, and you were promoted. When you received the news, there was no rush of excitement, only a calm kind of gratitude. You thought of your father, of how he used to tell you to do things carefully, to take pride in small steps, not just the finish line. In your first meeting as a manager, you looked around the room and saw younger co-workers staring at you with the same hopeful eyes you once had. And you realized maybe leadership isn't about control. It's about listening. It's about empathy. And sometimes, it's about knowing when to stay silent. That night, standing outside the office, you looked at the city lights reflected in the glass windows and remembered your father's words. "Work hard, but don't let work make you forget why you started." Now, you finally understood what he meant. Sometimes, he still visits you in dreams. Not in the way he used to, not as a figure of guilt or fear, but as a gentle presence. You see the two of you sitting together at the old wooden table, drinking tea. No words, no apologies, just peace. When you wake up, the world feels lighter, as if the dream had left a soft glow behind. And you wonder, maybe the people who leave us never really vanish. Maybe they stay, just in different forms, in our memories, in the way we love, in every good thing we do afterward. A year later, you decided to rebuild the old house. Not for yourself, but to turn it into a small community library for children in the neighborhood. Every time you heard the laughter echo through the rooms, your heart softened a little more. Your father's picture still hung on the wall, watching quietly as the light filtered through the curtains. One little boy once asked, "Sir, why did you make this place?" Close quote, you smiled, patting his head gently. "Because I wanted kids like you to have a place to dream. Because once, someone gave me that chance too." The boy grinned a big to the smile and ran off to play. And in that moment, you understood something profound. Pain, when transformed, can become a gift. One evening, as you sat writing again, you opened the same old notebook. The final page was no longer blank. You wrote one last line. "Dad, I'm living well. And I believe, somewhere out there, you're smiling too." You closed the notebook softly and looked out the window. The sunset spilled across the city, golden light dancing over rooftops, faces, and trees swaying gently in the wind. And you realized it wasn't that the light had returned. It was that you had learned to shine again. You remembered being a child, chasing after your father under the bright afternoon sun, trying to match his long, confident strides. Today, you still walk that same kind of road, only now, no one walks ahead of you. And you no longer need to run. Because this time, you've learned to walk steady with both feet and your own strength. The world outside is still full of storms, but you're not afraid anymore. Because strength isn't about never falling, it's about standing up again, with a heart still gentle. If you're listening to this, maybe you've lost someone too, someone who once made you angry, then made you love them even more, and finally left a silence you didn't know how to fill. But remember, that silence isn't there to weaken you. It exists so that you can learn to love deeper. Because when someone leaves, they don't just take a part of your past, they leave you something more precious behind. A lesson about love, about life, and about gratitude. And maybe, one day, when you stand before someone who's made mistakes, someone who's asking for a chance, you'll remember this story. And you'll smile gently and say, "It's okay, because someone once forgave me that way too." Life, after all, isn't about the storms we face, it's about the reasons we keep finding to love the world anyway. And sometimes, it's the cracks inside us that let the light in, the light left behind by those who once loved us, the kind that never truly fades, but changes shape, whispering softly through time, "Keep going, my child. Love never dies. It only transforms." Since the old house became a library, your life has found a new rhythm. Every morning, the sound of children's laughter echoed through the small yard, their voices overlapping with the rustle of pages being turned. You began waking up earlier, opening the windows to let the sunlight spill in, brewing a cup of tea, and standing quietly by the window, watching the children read, argue, share, and dream. Those small, ordinary sounds, laughter, whispers, the soft scratch of pencils, somehow made your heart warm again. Maybe because, in them, you saw yourself as a child, curious, innocent, unbroken by life's harshness, still believing that tomorrow could be brighter than today. You started telling the kids stories, not fairy tales, but stories about real people. People who had fallen, but got back up. People who learned that kindness, even when quiet, is still strength. The children listened, eyes wide, as if you were revealing a secret they had always wanted to know. And in that moment, you understood something profound. When someone rediscovers meaning in their life, the light begins to spread naturally. One afternoon, a boy named Koa, about 12 years old, came to the library. He rarely spoke, always sitting alone in the corner with a single book. Those who overcame fear. You walked over and asked softly, "Why do you like that one so much?" Close quote. He looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because it's about people like me. They're scared, but they try anyway. I want to be like them." You smiled and nodded, gently ruffling his messy hair. "You already are, Koa. When you face your fear, you've already won half the battle." From that day on, he began to talk more, laugh more. He was always the first to arrive, the last to leave. And you realized something simple, but powerful: healing always begins when someone finally feels heard. As weeks passed, the little library became busier. Some people came to read. Some just came to sit in silence. A few older neighbors stopped by too, saying they felt peaceful when they were there. You didn't do much, just greeted them with a smile, poured tea, and listened. There was a gentle old lady who brought cakes every week. "For the kids," close quote, she said, setting the tray down. "This place feels warmer than my home." You thanked her quietly, but inside, you felt something shift, a deep gratitude for the simple goodness that still exists in people, even when life hasn't been kind to them. One day, a group of college students showed up, asking to help teach the children. You agreed immediately. During their first session, you stood outside the classroom, watching sunlight pour through the windows, catching the dust and soft gold beams. You saw the young tutors explaining things patiently, laughing with the kids, and you thought, "This is what hope looks like." When the class ended, one of the students walked up to you and said, "You know, when I'm here, I feel like I'm healing too." You smiled. "We all need a place to begin again. And if you can't find one, create it." She paused, then said softly, "I think you've already done that." For the first time in years, you laughed, not politely, not out of habit, but truly, freely. But life, as always, finds its ways to test us. One morning, a sudden storm hit the town. Rain battered the roof. The wind shattered a few windows. Books were soaked, the walls stained, and the children frightened. You and a few others rushed to save what you could, but when the storm passed, the library looked broken, water everywhere, pages torn, words fading. That night, you sat alone in the dim light, the scent of wet paper thick in the air. You stared at the ruined books and thought about your father, about how many times he had fallen and still stood up again. And in that silence, you almost heard him whisper, "Don't give up, son. Just do what feels right." The next morning, you got up early and began cleaning. Soon, others joined you, the children, the students, the neighbors. Some brought wood, some brought paint, some just came to dry the books, one by one, with careful hands. Standing there, watching everyone working together, you felt something rise in your chest, a kind of happiness that didn't need words. It was the happiness of realizing that the light you once received was now being passed on through you. A week later, the library reopened. That morning, the sky was clear, the sunlight gentle. On the wall above the doorway, someone had painted a single line in white. A place where the light never goes out. You stood in front of it for a long time, unable to move. Beside you, little Koa tugged at your sleeve and asked, "Whose light is it, sir?" Close quote. You smiled, eyes glistening. "It's ours, Koa. It belongs to everyone who's been hurt but still chooses to love." That afternoon, you returned to the old park, the one where your father used to sit, where the wooden bench still rested beneath the tree. You sat down, looking up at the bright blue sky. The wind brushed your hair, carrying the scent of grass and faint traces of incense from somewhere far away. You closed your eyes and whispered, "Dad, can you see this? The light you left behind, I'm sharing it now. The light you left behind, I'm sharing it now. The light you left behind, I'm sharing it now." And in that moment, your heart felt light, as if the debt between you and him, between you and life itself, had finally been paid in full with gratitude. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you've asked yourself the same question once. Why did I have to go through so much pain? Why does life take so much, only to return peace so late? Maybe the answer lies right here. Because sometimes, our deepest wounds are what teach us how to become someone else's light. You don't need to do something grand. Sometimes, all it takes is a kind word, a patient silence, or a look that says, "I understand." And that's enough to help someone keep going. Every one of us, even the ones who have been lost, has the power to become a bearer of light, not by being perfect, but simply by being kind. Your life doesn't need to be flawless. It just needs to be real, a life where, every morning, your heart still beats with wonder, still wants to do good, still believes in people. You've walked a long road from pain, to forgiveness, to peace. And now, you no longer live just for yourself, but for those who once walked beside you, those who left, those who stayed, and even those who hurt you. Because maybe love isn't about holding on. It's about continuing the light in everything you do. If this story reminds you of someone who helped you, or someone you once hurt, take a moment. Write a message. Say thank you. Or simply smile. Because sometimes, that small act is enough to keep the light alive. And if this story touched you, if somewhere deep inside, you felt something shift, then let that be your quiet way of saying to the world, "I'm still here. I'm still choosing kindness." If you believe that life, even with its losses, is still worth loving, hit the like button, not for me, but for yourself, as a promise that you'll keep walking with gentleness. And if you want to keep traveling with me through stories that heal, that remind us we're never truly alone, then subscribe, so we can meet again in the next chapter. Because in the end, you know something now, the bearer of light isn't someone far away, it's you. It was a quiet autumn afternoon, the kind where sunlight fell like warm silk, and every gust of wind carried the scent of dry leaves. You were tidying up the library when a small, yellowed envelope slipped out from between two old notebooks. The paper was fragile, edges curled with age. On the top corner, written in trembling handwriting, were 5 words that made your heart stop. "To my beloved son." Your hand froze mid-air. A rush of emotion swept through you, fear, longing, confusion, hope. You sat down at the wooden table in the middle of the library, the same table where so many stories had been written and read. Now, it was time for your own. You opened the letter carefully. The handwriting wavered, uneven, but full of warmth. "My son, if you are reading this, then I am no longer there with you. I was never a good father, and I know that. There were times I hurt you, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to show my love properly. But not a single day went by when I didn't think of you, or pray that you'd be okay. I was wrong to make you carry the weight of my pride and my fear. I wanted to teach you to be strong, but I forgot that real strength also means being gentle, being able to say, 'I need love.'" You paused. Tears blurred the ink, your chest tightening, as if every word reached into the deepest corners of your heart. It didn't hurt anymore, not in the old bitter way. This pain was different. It was soft. It was the kind of ache that comes when you finally hear the words you've waited your whole life to hear. "I love you, my son. I remember the day you left home. I stood at the door, wanting to run after you, but I was too afraid you'd hate me more. I wrote this letter many times, but kept tearing it apart because I didn't know how to begin, except with "I'm sorry." If one day you find it in your heart to forgive me, don't think it makes you weak. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's what happens when your heart finally understands that love, even when clumsy, was still love. You folded the letter gently, but your hands wouldn't stop trembling. The room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock, as if time itself was holding its breath. And in that stillness, you felt something inside you loosen, as if a part of your soul that had been locked away for years had finally been set free. You stepped outside. The air was cool. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the clouds in gold and crimson. You sat on the steps, letting the breeze brush past your face. "Dad," you whispered. Your voice cracked, but you didn't stop. "I was angry for so long. I thought you didn't care. But now I understand. You were just trying the only way you knew how." The tears came not heavy, not bitter, but gentle, almost healing. For the first time, they didn't burn. They felt like forgiveness itself had taken form and was flowing through you, cleansing everything old and cold. In that moment, there was no winner or loser. No father, no son, just two souls who had finally found each other again across the silence of time. That night, you returned to the library. You lit a small stick of incense and placed the letter beside your father's framed photo. The smoke curled upward like soft whispers rising toward the heavens. "Dad," close quote, you said quietly, "I read your letter. And I promise I'll live well." Outside, the sound of children laughing echoed faintly. They had no idea that, inside that little room, a reconciliation between two generations had just taken place, one that required no words, only an open heart. A few days later, you did something new. You placed a small wooden box on the library counter, with a handwritten sign. The unspoken box. Anyone could write a letter to someone who had passed away, to someone they'd hurt, or even to themselves. Soon, letters began to appear. One was for a lost mother. Another for an estranged friend. One simply said, "I forgive myself." Every time you read them, you felt your chest tighten with emotion, not sadness, but a deep human tenderness. It was as if all the unspoken pain of the world had finally found a place to rest. One evening, as you were cleaning up, little Koa ran to you with an envelope in his hands. "Sir," close quote, he said shyly, "I wrote a letter too." You smiled. "Who's it for, Koa?" Close quote, "For my dad. I've never met him, but I want to tell him that I'm not mad anymore." You looked at him for a long moment, then placed your hand gently on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, Koa. Sometimes forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for your own heart." He nodded, then dropped his letter into the box. The faint sound of paper landing echoed softly, but somehow, it felt like the world had just healed, even if just a little. Night fell quietly. You sat outside the library, watching fireflies drift through the darkness. The moonlight bathed the path in silver, and for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of memories, of peace, of quiet love that refused to fade. You thought of your father, of the letter, of all the words you had never said. And for once, you didn't feel regret. You felt thankful because every hurt, every storm, had led you here to this stillness, this grace. A place not just for books, but for hearts learning to love again. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you too are holding on to a letter never sent, words that stayed inside your heart because you didn't know if anyone would understand them. Maybe you've been angry for too long, or maybe you've built walls so high that even love can't climb over. But you know what? Sometimes, we don't need answers, we just need the courage to open the door. Because when you finally look at your pain, not with fear but with compassion, you'll start hearing what you couldn't before, that love was there all along, just wearing a different face. The next morning, you returned to the unspoken box. It was nearly full. Letters of regret, of love, of forgiveness, each one a small universe of emotion. You read one that said, "Mom, I forgive you for leaving. Maybe you didn't know how to stay." And another, "To my younger self, you did the best you could." Each word felt like a heartbeat, fragile but alive, proof that no one truly heals alone. You realized then that forgiveness isn't the end of a story, it's the beginning of a new one, where people learn how to love properly this time. As the sun dipped behind the hills that evening, you lit a single candle on the library's windowsill. Its small flame flickered, casting golden light across the shelves, dancing softly on the framed photo of your father. For a long time, you just sat there, watching the flame. And then you whispered, "Dad, I hope you're proud. I think I finally understand what love really means." The flame wavered, then steadied as if answering you. If, while listening to this, someone came to mind, someone you once loved, or lost, or maybe hurt, write to them. Even if you never send it. Because the act of writing it is already a kind of forgiveness. And if you've been carrying anger toward yourself, breathe. You deserve grace too. You deserve peace. If this story touched your heart, if somewhere inside you felt something quietly unfold, then maybe it's time to tell the world, not with loud words, but with a simple gesture. hit like, not for me, but as your way of saying, I'm still here. I'm still choosing kindness. And if you wish to walk further with me through stories that don't just speak, but heal, then subscribe, so you and I can meet again, in another story where broken hearts learn to glow again. Because sometimes, the miracle isn't that we are forgiven. It's that we dare to forgive. A year had passed since you found your father's letter. The little library still glowed every night, but now it had become something more than a place for reading. It had become a sanctuary, a quiet home for those whose hearts once broken learned to beat again. The faces were familiar now. Koa, no longer the shy boy in the corner, had grown taller and more confident. The old woman still brought sweet cakes every week. The college students, though busy with work, continued to visit whenever they could. Each one of them, in their own way, had become part of the light that kept this place alive. Every morning, when you unlocked the door, the first thing you saw were the children running, laughing, eyes shining like they were chasing treasure. They'd choose books, gather in circles, and read aloud until their voices turned into the song of morning. And when you heard the laughter echo through the sunlit room, you knew every hardship had been worth it. One afternoon, you received a letter from a young woman who once volunteered as a teacher here. She wrote, "Sir, the time I spent at the library changed me. I learned that everyone carries a story, and sometimes all they need is someone who will listen without judgment. I've graduated now and started teaching at a small school. But every time I see my students smile, I remember those children from your library and you, who taught me how to see the light in others." You read her letter again and again. Not because of the words themselves, but because of what they meant. The quiet, undeniable truth that everything you give from the heart never really disappears. Everything you give from the One chilly evening, you sat on the library's steps, watching the last rays of the sun fall across the trees. In the distance, Ko was helping a younger boy read, his voice strong and certain. You smiled. You remembered the same boy years ago, silently clutching those who overcame fear. "You've done it, Ko," close quote, you whispered. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere beyond the clouds, your father was whispering the same to you. At night, when the laughter faded and the world grew still, you often stayed behind, sitting beside a wooden table, reading through the letters in the unspoken box. The box was full now. Every letter a fragment of pain, but also of hope, people learning to speak what they once buried. One said, "I used to think I could never forgive my mother for leaving. But now I understand she was scared too. I hope she's at peace." Another read, "To my younger self, stop blaming yourself for being weak. You needed to be soft to learn how to be kind." As you read, your throat tightened, but your heart filled with quiet strength. You realized something simple and profound. Humans may hurt each other, but they also have the power to heal one another. Then, one day, a small film crew arrived. They said they were making a feature on places that keep hope alive. You hesitated at first. Cameras still made you uneasy, but eventually agreed. During the interview, a reporter asked, "What keeps you running this library after all these years?" Close quote, you smiled. "Because once, someone handed me a small light," close quote, you said. "And now, I just want to pass it on." The reporter paused, then asked softly, "If you could send a message to those watching, what would you say?" Close quote, you looked into the camera, your voice calm but steady. "Try opening your heart, even just a little. Because you never know, you might be the person someone needs to believe in tomorrow." When the program aired, people began coming to the library, some with books, some with nothing but silence. One middle-aged man stood by the unspoken box for a long time before finally writing something down. When he finished, tears filled his eyes. He whispered, "I've never said sorry to my son before. But tonight I will." You didn't reply, just placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Because sometimes, silence is how we say, "I understand." The library grew busier, but it never felt crowded. Each person who walked in seemed to leave a little lighter, as if they'd set down a piece of their pain before going. The small room had become a garden of gentleness, blooming with gratitude, forgiveness, and love rediscovered. One evening, a teenage girl came in, holding a faded photograph. "Sir," close quote, she said softly, "this is my father. He passed away when I was little. But last night, I dreamt he was standing here in front of this library telling me to come find you." You smiled gently. "Maybe that's because this is a place where things left unsaid can finally be heard." She placed the photo on the little altar in the corner and bowed her head. When she looked up again, her eyes were clear. "I don't feel sad anymore," close quote, she said. You didn't ask anything more. Because in her voice, you heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the sound of a heart finding peace. That spring, you hosted the library's first outdoor reading day. People came from all over, children, parents, teachers, strangers. Ko and his friends read stories they'd written themselves, stories about family, love, and second chances. As you listened, you realized, there are still countless reasons to love this world, we just forget to look sometimes. You stood up and said, "We all carry wounds. But from those wounds, light can be born. If you feel lost today, don't be afraid, the light will find you, as long as you keep believing in it. Applause filled the air. Some smiled. Some wiped away tears. And above you, sunlight spilled through the trees, warm, golden, endless. That night, after the outdoor reading ended, you walked home alone. The moon hung bright and low, washing the streets in silver. You followed the same road you once walked with your father, long ago, the same road that once felt so heavy, now softened by peace. You looked up at the sky, a sky scattered with stars, each one glowing like a letter of light, whispering messages too quiet for words. You smiled, your chest rising and falling in rhythm with the wind. Datlow's quote, you said softly, "I think I finally did what you always hoped I would." And just then, a cool breeze swept past your face, gentle, warm, almost like a hand. For a brief moment, it felt like he was there, standing beside you, smiling the same way he used to. You didn't need proof. You just knew. If you're listening to this now, maybe you too carry a sadness inside you, a word left unsaid, a person you still miss, a memory that never fades. But here's the truth. Every sorrow, if placed gently in the right place, can still bloom. Because no storm lasts forever, and after the rain, there is always light. So tonight, if the sky above you feels too dark, don't rush to curse the darkness. Sit with it. Breathe. And wait, because light is patient. It always finds its way to those who still believe. If this story reminded you of someone you love, someone you lost, or even someone you once hurt, take a moment tonight. Write to them, even if it's only in your heart. Because sometimes, writing isn't about reaching them, it's about reaching yourself. And if this story touched something deep inside you, a quiet place that still believes in kindness, then let's keep that light alive together. Hit like, not for me, but as your way of saying, I still believe in love. I still believe in good people. And if you'd like to walk further with me through stories of loss and healing, through nights that end with hope, then subscribe, so that next time, when a new story begins, you'll be here where light and memory meet. Because maybe, just maybe, every ending is only the beginning of a new kind of light. Tonight, as the city drifts into silence, you're still sitting there in the small library, bathed in golden light. Outside, the rain has stopped. A few drops cling to the window, catching the moonlight like fallen stars. You close your eyes, take a deep breath, and realize that life, despite its storms, is still beautiful when you dare to open your heart. Maybe each of us carries an unsent letter, a word we never said, a thank you left behind, or a goodbye we didn't know how to give. But here's the quiet truth. When you find